My name is Priya Anand. I'm 38 years old, and I make hair for women who are dying to feel human again. Cancer patients. Chemo took their hair. I give them back a version they can look at in the mirror without flinching. At my mother-in-law's boutique gala, in front of 300 people in diamonds, Vivian Ashford lifted a microphone and smiled at me. This is Priya. She plays with fake hair. Cute little hobby. Even the charity crowd needs someone, I suppose. The room laughed politely. I didn't. I folded my hands and stayed silent, the way I always do. What none of them knew was that the guest of honor was already reaching for her phone. My name is Priya Anand. I'm 38 years old, and I've been married to Julian Ashford for 7 years. He's the only son of the Ashford name, the boutique chain his mother built from a single storefront in 1986 into 40 stores across the country. When people hear my last name now, they think of silk scarves and appointment-only fitting rooms. They don't think of me. That's fine. I never needed them to. At 8 that morning, before the gala was even a date circled on Julian's calendar, I was in my studio on the second floor of a converted textile building, kneeling in front of a woman named Rosa Delgado. Rosa was 34. She'd finished her 4th round of chemotherapy 11 days earlier, and her daughter's wedding was in 6 weeks. She sat very still while I wrapped the measuring tape around her skull, temple to temple, nape to crown, the plastic cool against skin that had gone pale and thin. You have to write all that down? She asked. Her voice had a laugh folded inside it, the kind people use when they're afraid the real question underneath is too big to ask out loud. Every millimeter, I said. Your head isn't a guess to me. It's a set of numbers I have to get right the first time. I felt the curve above her left ear, made a note, felt the slope at the back. She closed her eyes. I've learned that clients do that at a certain point, not from discomfort, but because being touched carefully, after months of being touched clinically, undoes something in people. I don't rush that part. My daughter wants a mother of the bride picture, Rosa said. I keep imagining it without hair. I can't make the picture stop. Then we'll make sure that's not the picture, I said, and I meant it the way I mean everything I say in that room, as a fact I intend to deliver, not a comfort I'm offering to fill silence. It took me 11 days after that to hand-tie nearly 40,000 strands, one at a time, into a base built from a mold of her exact skull. When she wore it home, she stood in front of my mirror and touched her own hairline like she was checking it was real. It was in every way that mattered to her. That's the job. Nobody claps for it. I've never needed them to. That night, Julian and I had dinner at his parents' house, the way we did most Sundays. Vivian Ashford, 66, sat at the head of the table under a chandelier she'd once told a reporter cost more than most people's first homes. She placed me at the far end, past Julian's cousins, past the family attorney and his wife, in the seat closest to the kitchen door so the staff could reach me first with the serving trays and last with everything else. Priya does her little handicraft work, Vivian said to the attorney's wife, gesturing toward me with her wine glass without quite looking at me. Very sweet. Keeps her busy. I didn't correct her. I never do, not because I'm meek. People who've watched me negotiate a client's insurance claim down to the dollar know I'm not, but because I made a promise to every woman who's ever sat in my chair that her name, her diagnosis, her fear of a wedding photo without hair, stays in that room. Vivian doesn't know what I do because I've never told her the details, and I've never told her because the details aren't mine to give away. It's a discipline. Some people go to church for it. I go to silence. Margaret Osei, Vivian's assistant of 30 years, caught my eye once across the table that night. Just once. She didn't smile, exactly. It was something closer to recognition, gone as fast as it came, and I filed it away without knowing yet that it meant anything. After dinner, on the drive home, Julian's phone buzzed on the console between us. He glanced at it at a red light, and I watched something pass over his face, a flicker, quickly smoothed. He handed the phone to me. It was the save the date for the boutique's 40th anniversary gala, gold script on cream cardstock, and beneath it, a text from Vivian. Tell your wife to wear something dark. Nothing that draws attention. I read it twice. Then I set the phone in the cup holder and looked out the window at the streetlights sliding past. She means well, Julian said, which is the sentence he's used for 7 years to close doors he doesn't want to walk through. I didn't answer that either. I was thinking about Rosa Delgado's daughter's wedding, 6 weeks out, and whether the crown piece would hold through an outdoor ceremony in August humidity. That felt like the more useful thing to carry home. When we pulled into the driveway, Julian handed me back the phone he'd already looked at twice. Mom says this year there's a guest of honor. Someone special, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Just don't take it personally if she says something. You know how she gets in front of a crowd. I looked at him a long moment. In 7 years, Julian had never once warned me in advance. Priya Studio, 2nd floor, 3 weeks before the boutique's 40th anniversary gala. The message arrived through Nadia's referral chain on a Tuesday afternoon. No name attached. Just a number and a single line. Client requests complete discretion.
Cash.
After hours only. I get requests like this more than people think. Grief doesn't like an audience. I texted back my studio address and a time. Thursday, 7 p.m., an hour after I usually lock up. Then I went back to sweeping hair clippings off the floor and didn't think about it again until Thursday came. She was already outside when I got there, standing under the awning like she didn't want to be seen standing anywhere. A scarf, dark green, wrapped high around her throat and up over her hairline. Sunglasses, even though the sun had been down for 20 minutes. She was tall, straight-backed in a way that looked like it cost her something to maintain. Ms. Anand. Her voice was clipped, practiced smooth, the kind of voice that gives orders for a living. That's me.
Come in.
I didn't ask her name at the door. I never do, not with the discreet ones. You learn to read what a person is offering you and what they're not. Inside, I dimmed the overheads and left just the fitting lamp on, angled low so it wouldn't catch her face straight on. She sat. Up close I could see the damage the scarf was built to hide. Hair thin to something like static across her scalp, patchy at the crown, the kind of loss that doesn't come from chemo but from somewhere quieter, slower, meaner. Diffuse. Not a bald patch. An erasure. I needed to look natural from 3 feet away, she said. Not from far. From 3 feet. People will stand close to me. Understood. I reached for my tablet. I usually take a reference photo for the file just for... No photos. I set the tablet down without an argument. Okay. She exhaled like she'd been braced for a fight that didn't come. That told me more than her face would have. I worked by touch instead. Fingers walking her hairline, mapping density in inches, noting the exact place her natural growth dipped at the temple, the faint cowlick behind her left ear. She held very still the whole time, the way people hold still when stillness is the only thing they can control. You won't look at me, she said at one point, not quite a question. I don't need to. I need to feel where the hair used to be. I paused. That's the whole trick. Nobody looks like their photo once the hair's gone. They look like their hands moving. I learned to build the wig off that instead. She didn't answer, but her shoulders came down half an inch. 11 days, I told her, closing my notebook. I'll call this number when it's ready. Don't call. Text. And not from your business number. I gave her a second number I keep for exactly this. She memorized it, didn't write it down, and left the way she came, collar up, fast gone. 11 days later she was back in the same chair. I won't pretend this one didn't matter to me. It had climbed to the top of the pile the moment I started it. 40,000 strands, hand-tied, one at a time. The part line drawn to match a scalp I'd only ever touched in the dark. I settled it onto her head myself, adjusted at the nape, and held the hand mirror up at exactly 3 feet. She went still. Then, very quietly, nobody will know. That's the arrangement. She opened her purse and counted out cash, twice what I'd quoted her. I started to protest, and she cut me off with one flat sentence. The other half is for your silence, not your hands. She said it like she'd rehearsed it in the car. Silence isn't for sale, I said. It's just how I work. Every client in this room gets the same one. She looked at me a second too long, like she wanted to say something else and didn't. That same week, Nadia called me raging about a dress fitting she'd tagged along to with a friend at the Ashford Boutique on Prescott Street. She'd overheard two saleswomen near the changing rooms, not bothering to lower their voices, joking that the WIG girl had married up further than she deserved. I wanted to walk over there and give them my nurse's badge and my opinion, Nadia said. In that order. Let it go, Nadia. You let too much go, Priya. That's your whole problem. I didn't mention the client in the scarf. Some things stay in the room they happened in. When my mystery client left that night, she moved fast, collar up, already reaching for the door. The scarf caught on the frame and slipped, just for a second, down past her ear, long enough for me to catch the glint of a brooch pinned at her collarbone. Gold, oval, a small cluster of pearls around the rim. Familiar in a way I couldn't place and didn't have time to chase, because she'd already yanked the scarf back into place and was gone into the dark. I stood there a second too long myself. Strange, I thought. I've seen that pin somewhere. Then I shrugged it off, locked the door, and told myself I was imagining things. The ballroom at the Wickham Hotel held 400 people, and every one of them seemed to be looking at Vivian Ashford. I sat at table 19, past the dessert station, next to two men from the catering company still in their black vests, checking their watches. Someone had folded my napkin into a swan. I unfolded it and set it flat. 40 years of Ashford Boutiques, the banner over the stage read, gold letters on ivory silk. Vivian stood beneath it in emerald green, laughing at something the mayor's wife had said, one hand resting on the podium, like she owned the air around it. She did, in a way. 40 stores. Since 1986. I had heard that number so many times at family dinners it had stopped sounding like an achievement and started sounding like a wall. Is this seat taken? I looked up. Margaret Osei stood there in navy silk, holding a champagne flute she wasn't drinking from. No. Please. She sat, smoothing her skirt, and for a moment neither of us said anything. In 7 years of marriage, Margaret had never once sat next to me at anything. She organized Vivian's calendar, her flights, her fittings. She did not sit at table 19. Julian tells me you had a big week, she said. New client. A few. You do the wigs. For the sick ones. She said it plainly, not the way Vivian said it, like there was dirt on the word. How do you know what someone needs? Before they tell you. I thought about Rosa Delgado's hands shaking over the swatch book 2 days ago, and the way she'd finally pointed to the chestnut one without looking up. You watch what they avoid touching, I said. That's usually where it hurts. Margaret's eyes went somewhere else for a second. Somewhere private. Her thumb moved over the rim of the glass, once, twice, like she was deciding whether to say something and then deciding against it. That's a good way to put it, she said, quiet, and drank from a glass that was still full. Margaret. I turned toward her fully. Are you all right? Ai fine. She smiled. Too fast to be believed. Long week. Vivian's had me redoing the seating chart 4 times. I let it go, though I noted it the way I noted a client's silence. Filed away, not forgotten. I wanted to ask her what was wrong. I didn't get the chance. The lights dimmed, then rose again in a warm gold wash, and Vivian tapped the microphone twice. Feedback shrieked through the speakers before the sound man fixed it. 40 years ago, Vivian began, I opened a single shop on Prescott Street with 11 dresses and a sewing machine that jammed if you looked at it wrong. Laughter, warm and easy. She told the story at every anniversary I'd sat through, and every year it sanded down a little smoother, lost a little more of whatever had actually happened on Prescott Street. Tonight, I want to thank the people who made this possible. My son Julian, who has never once complained about being dragged to a trunk show. Julian, 3 tables up, raised his glass, laughing along. My dear friend and right hand, Margaret, without whom I would have missed my own wedding, probably. Beside me, Margaret smiled the practiced smile of someone who has heard her own name used as a punchline for 30 years. Under the table, her free hand had closed into a fist against her thigh. And of course, Vivian said, and I felt it coming before it landed, the way you feel a chair about to be pulled, my daughter-in-law, Priya, who plays with fake hair for a living. Very sweet. Actually, she does some of it for the charities. Bless her heart. The laugh that went through the room was soft, indulgent, the kind of laugh people give when they've decided something is harmless. 400 people, laughing at something they didn't understand, at a woman they never bothered to ask a single question. I did not look at the stage. I looked at my water glass and watched my own fingers whiten around it. I could have stood up right there and told them what I actually did, described the shape of a scalp after 4 rounds of chemotherapy, the way a client named Rosa had finally, on day 11, run her fingers through 40,000 strands sewn one at a time and cried because it looked like her own hair used to. I could have told them Vivian didn't know the first thing about what playing meant. I didn't. I had made a promise a long time ago, to every person who ever sat in my chair, that their name would stay in that room and nowhere else. Not even here. Not even to save myself. Julian's eyes were on his plate. He had not looked up once. Something moved at the head table. A woman in deep blue rose from her chair, the guest of honor, the one whose name had been printed in gold on the program above even Vivian's, the one I'd been told to address as Ms. Cross if I addressed her at all. She had been watching me, I realized. Not the stage. Me. For longer than I'd noticed, since before Vivian had even reached the podium, her gaze returning to table 19 again, and again like she was checking something against a memory. The laughter was still settling when she started toward the podium, unhurried, her hand already extended. The microphone caught a small feedback whine as Delphine adjusted it, and the sound seemed to pull the whole room forward an inch. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, she said. I told my assistant, keep it to the checks and the applause, Delphine. Don't make it strange. A small laugh moved through the crowd, warm, expectant. But Vivian talked about 40 years of dressing women who wanted to feel like themselves. And I want to talk about 2 years when I didn't know what that meant anymore. She wasn't reading from a card. Her hands were empty except for the microphone, and I watched her knuckles, the way they tightened and released, like she was testing her own grip on the story before she let it out. Stage 4 was never my diagnosis, she said. I was luckier than that. Stage 2, caught early, excellent surgeon, excellent odds. Everyone kept telling me how lucky I was. And I kept nodding because it was true, and because I didn't have the language yet for what wasn't fine. She paused. The chemo took 11 days to take my hair. I know because I counted. I have never been a woman who counted days before. I counted those. Somewhere behind me, a fork set down against a plate, careful, like the sound itself might be rude. There's a morning I still see, Delphine said. I was getting ready to go on air, first day back after the second round, and I stood in front of my mirror at 5:40 in the morning, and the woman looking back at me was not someone millions of people were expecting to see at 7. I didn't recognize my own skull. I want to be that specific because people say losing your hair like it's a haircut. It's not a haircut. It's watching yourself get erased in a mirror you've used for 15 years. I felt my water glass sweating against my palm. I didn't remember picking it back up. A friend gave me a name, Delphine went on. Not a company, a name and a phone number, and she said, this person doesn't do this like anyone else does this. So I called. And someone spent 4 hours with me, measuring, listening, not once asking me to perform being strong for them, which is what everyone else wanted from me that year. For hours, and at the end of it I had. She stopped herself, exhaled. I had my face back. Not my hair. My face. Do you understand the difference? I do now. She nodded off stage, and the ballroom's twin screens flickered, then filled with a photograph. A woman in a hospital gown, thin at the temples, eyes too large for her face. Then the image dissolved into another, the same woman under studio lights, unmistakably Delphine, hair falling exactly the way hair falls when it's never been anywhere near an oncology ward. The room made a sound that wasn't quite a gasp, more like 200 people inhaling at once. My chest went tight before my brain caught up to why. I knew that hairline. I knew the part, the slight asymmetry I'd built in on purpose because true symmetry reads as fake under television lighting. I had matched that density by hand, strand by strand, nearly 40,000 strands, Knotted one at a time over 11 straight nights in my studio, for a client who never told me what she did for a living. Delphine let the second photo sit on the screens a long moment before she spoke again. I went back on air 9 days after that fitting, she said. Nobody in my audience knew what I'd been through until I chose to tell them, months later, on my own terms. That was the gift. Not the hair, the choosing. Her eyes swept the room, unhurried, and I had the sudden, sick certainty that they would land on our table before she said another word. They didn't. Not yet. I tried to thank this person properly. Sent flowers to the address on the invoice. They came back. No forwarding information. It took me almost a year, with people who tracked down anything for a living, to find out who had done that work. She let that hang. Because she never once, in 11 years I'm told she's been doing this, put her name on anything. No cards in the box. No signature on the cap. I had to go through 3 intermediaries and a hospital social worker who owed me a favor before someone finally said a name out loud. Beside me, Julian had gone very still, his fork suspended halfway to his plate. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at me, and I watched the exact second it landed, the tilt of his head, the way his mouth opened and then didn't finish opening. 2 tables over, Margaret Osei had one hand pressed flat against her collarbone, her eyes flicking from the photographs to Vivian's podium and back, like she already knew what was coming and couldn't decide which direction to brace for. Vivian was still smiling from the podium, gracious, a little puzzled, the practiced expression of a woman waiting for the compliment to circle back to her own foundation, her own guests, her own 40 years. I recognized that smile. I had watched her wear it at every event where she introduced me as something to be gotten through quickly. Delphine turned to Vivian, still smiling. "Our hostess," she said, pleasant as a knife wrapped in linen. "Would you like to guess the name of this artist? A hint, you know her very well." Vivian laughed. Easy. Already reaching to reclaim the moment. "Oh, I'm sure it's someone from my circle in the fashion world. Priya Anand," Delphine said again, louder this time, so the words carried to the back of the ballroom. "That's her name." 200 heads turned. I felt it before I understood it. The pull of attention swinging across the room like a searchlight, landing on table 19, on me, on the water glass I'd been holding for the last 4 minutes, without drinking from it. Somewhere near the kitchen doors, a chair scraped against the floor. Then another. Margaret was on her feet before I registered she'd moved. Then a man in a navy suit 2 tables over. Then a woman in emerald green the first didn't recognize, clapping with her hands raised above her head like she was at a concert instead of a gala. The sound built in patches, uneven, the way applause does when people aren't sure yet if they're supposed to. I didn't stand. Delphine found me across the room, found my face specifically, not just the direction of table 19, and extended her hand toward the stage, toward the space beside her at the podium.
"Come up," she said. "Please.
Let them see you." Every part of my training said no. 11 years of fittings had taught me that the work isn't mine to display. It belongs to the woman in the chair, to the 60 minutes she spends looking like herself again before she has to go back out into a world that stares. I don't take photos for a portfolio. I don't post before and afters. When people ask what I do at parties, I say I make hairpieces, and I let the sentence end there because the alternative is turning someone's worst year into my marketing material. So I stayed in my seat, and I did the only thing that felt true to 11 years of that rule. I inclined my head, just slightly, an acknowledgement, not a performance. Delphine seemed to understand it immediately. I watched something in her posture soften, like she'd expected exactly this, and was relieved to be right. She turned back to the room instead of pressing. "She won't come up here," Delphine said, "and I understand why. Because the women I'm about to tell you about didn't want to be named either." She nodded to someone off to the side, and the screen behind her changed. A new photograph. A woman in her 50s, bald, sitting in a hospital chair, smiling at the camera with an 4-line taped to the back of her hand. Then the same woman, months later, hair falling past her shoulders, laughing at something outside the frame. "This is a woman I met in my support group," Delphine said. "She asked me not to use her name tonight. So, I won't. But she wanted you to see this." Another photograph. Another woman. Another before. Another after. 12 women reached out to me this week when they heard I was receiving this award. 12. Not because they wanted credit. Because they wanted the person who made this possible for them to know that it mattered somewhere beyond a receipt. The applause had gone quiet now, replaced by something with more weight to it. The particular stillness of several hundred people recalculating who they were sitting next to, who they'd been laughing with a few minutes earlier. I found Julian's face across the room. He was staring at me, and for once I couldn't read what was underneath it. His hand had gone still around the stem of his wine glass, like he'd forgotten it was there. Nadia leaned toward me from the next seat, her voice low but urgent. "Say something," she whispered. "You don't have to name a single client. Just don't let her walk away thinking she got away with anything." "I'm not doing this here," I whispered back. "Not like this. She humiliated you at your own table an hour ago." "I know what she did." I kept my eyes on the stage. "That doesn't change what I owe the women who trusted me." Nadia's jaw tightened, but she sat back. And then I found Vivian. She was still standing at the podium, half a step back from Delphine, and the smile she'd been wearing all night, the one built for photographs, corners lifted just so, had gone rigid. Not gone. Frozen. Like someone had paused the moment before she finished deciding what expression came next. I'd seen Vivian recover from worse in a single breath. I'd watched her turn a cracked vase into a story about her grandmother's resilience, watched her spin a cancelled trunk show into an act of exclusivity. She was whatever else she was, extraordinary at controlling a room. She wasn't controlling this one. Her eyes moved once toward me, not with the practiced disdain I'd grown used to across 7 years of dinner tables, but with something closer to alarm. Genuine, unrehearsed. The kind of look that comes before a person understands they're standing on ground that isn't solid anymore. Then her hand came up. It was small, almost nothing, the kind of gesture a person makes without deciding to make it. Her fingers rose to her temple, to the place where her hairline met her forehead, and touched it. Lightly. Checking it. The way you touch a door to see if it's locked. I'd made hairlines like that. I knew the particular give of a well-set piece against skin, knew that the gesture Vivian had just made, quick, private, reflexive, was not the gesture of a woman adjusting a clip for comfort. It was the gesture of a woman making sure something was still exactly where she'd left it, still hidden. I set my water glass down. A hooded woman had come into my studio 3 weeks ago, on a Thursday, 7 in the evening, 3 weeks before this very gala. She wouldn't let me see her face. She paid in cash and left through the service entrance. Her scarf had slipped for 1 second, and underneath it I'd seen a hairpin, a particular twist of wire, bent by hand, the kind I only ever saw on pieces I'd made myself. I hadn't let myself finish that thought until now. Across the ballroom, Vivian's hand was still at her hairline. And I understood, with the particular clarity of a fact arriving before you're ready for it, that I already knew whose hairline it was. Delphine's hand hadn't fully lowered the microphone when Vivian moved. She crossed the stage in 4 steps, heels striking the parquet with the same rhythm she used to open every store since 1986, and lifted the microphone from Delphine's fingers with a smile so smooth it looked rehearsed for exactly this moment. "Isn't that extraordinary?" she said, and the room, still standing, still clapping, slowly quieted to hear her. "Truly. I get chills." She let a beat pass. I watched her find Julian in the crowd, then me, then the cameras near the back wall recording the anniversary reel for the Ashford website. "What most of you don't know," Vivian said, "is that I've supported Priya in this work from the very beginning. It was actually my suggestion, years ago, that she turn her talent towards something charitable. I told her, a skill like yours shouldn't just sit in a drawer." I felt Margaret go still beside me. Not a flinch. A held breath. "She's family," Vivian continued, touching her chest lightly over the pearls. "And of course, being in Ashford opens doors. The kind of clients Priya works with, women like Delphine, they trust a name they recognize. I'd like to think our family's reputation made some of tonight's miracles possible." A ripple went through the tables near the front. Not applause exactly. Something softer and worse, nods. A woman at table 6 murmured something to her husband, and he nodded too. I watched the story rewrite itself in real time, watched 300 people accept a new version of the last 5 minutes because it was delivered with better posture than the truth had been. Delphine's mouth opened. She looked at Vivian, then at the microphone now out of her hands, then at me. And I saw something rare on her face for a woman who'd spent 30 years live on camera. She didn't know what to say. She'd built her whole story around gratitude toward a stranger. She hadn't built it to survive a count move. That's not, Delphine started, but Vivian had already turned, already gesturing warmly toward the anniversary banner behind her, already moving the room's attention like water finding a new channel. 40 years, Vivian said. 40 years of opening doors for people. Tonight is proof that legacy matters. The applause came back, uncertain at first, then fuller, because applause is easier than confusion. I sat at table 19, with my hands flat on the linen. 7 years, I thought. 7 years married into this name, and I had never once heard her call me family in front of 300 people until it served her. I had believed that if the truth got loud enough, it would simply stand there and hold. Vivian had spent 40 years learning that a story told with enough confidence doesn't need to be true. It only needs to be first, or loud, or delivered by someone the room already trusts. I looked for Julian. He was 3 tables away, standing near his father's old business partner, and he was looking at his mother on the stage.
Not at me.
His jaw was tight, his glass untouched in his hand. I watched his thumb move against the stem of the glass, once, twice, the only sign that anything in him was arguing with itself. He did not stand. He did not correct her. Whatever he had almost done at the mention of Delphine's photographs, he had folded it back down. That, more than anything Vivian had said into the microphone, was the thing that moved through me like cold water. A husband could choose a side without ever leaving his chair. He had just chosen one. I stood. I told Margaret I needed air. I don't remember the words, only that my chair made a small sound against the floor, a note nobody else registered. I walked past table 11, past the ice sculpture already softening at its base, out through the glass doors of the Whitcomb Hotel ballroom to the balcony above the garden. The night air smelled like rain that hadn't started yet. Below me, a valet ran across the wet cobblestone toward a waiting car, his shoes slapping the stone, and for a moment I envied him. Somewhere to run to, something simple to carry. I put both hands on the railing and made myself breathe in a count of 4, the way I did with clients who couldn't look at their own reflection yet. In 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. My own trick turned back on me. I had thought silence was armor. Tonight I'd learned it could also be a door somebody else walked through. Behind me, the balcony door opened. I didn't turn, expecting Julian, half dreading it, half wanting it. It wasn't him. Margaret stood there instead, her wrap slipping off one shoulder, both hands wrapped around a small paper bag like it might spill. Her fingers were shaking. "Miss Priya," she said, and her voice had none of its dinner-table politeness left in it. "I've been carrying this for 3 weeks. I can't watch her do this to you one more time." The string quartet's Vivaldi thinned into silence, and applause rippled through the gap in the doors. Vivian must have finished her toast. Margaret's hand didn't let go of the paper bag. She pulled me 2 steps further into the shadow of the potted palm, away from the ballroom, away from the noise. "Sit," she said, and pushed a folding chair toward me with her foot. I didn't sit. She sat instead, knees together, purse in her lap like she was at a doctor's office waiting for results. "Vivian has Hashimoto's," Margaret said. "Diagnosed 14 months ago. Thyroid. The hair loss started in the spring, first just thinning at the crown, then patches. She wouldn't see an endocrinologist properly, wouldn't take the medication on schedule, because she was too busy being terrified someone would see her without a full head of hair before the gala planning even started." I stood very still. My champagne glass was still in my hand, warm now, untouched. "I found her a wig maker," Margaret went on. "Back in April. I didn't find you, Priya. I found a name, 3 hands removed, no photograph, no signature, cash only. That's how she wanted it. That's how I set it up. I called a number Nadia's hospital liaison gave a friend of mine who gave it to me. I never once heard the word Anand. I swear to you I didn't know. I thought of a Thursday evening in April. The studio lights turn low, a woman in a scarf and dark glasses sitting in my chair with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles went pale. I had measured her scalp by touch. I had not looked at her face longer than courtesy required. That was the rule. That was always the rule. She paid you, Margaret said, and now she opened the paper bag on her lap. Twice what you asked. Because she wanted a promise nobody would ever know. She took out an envelope, thick with something more than paper, and beneath it, in a small resealable bag, a coiled sample of hair, pale gold, fine as thread, tied with a bit of blue ribbon the way I always tie my sample strands before matching a dye lot. I knew that ribbon. I'd buy it by the spool. I kept it, Margaret said, because I pick up whatever's left in a room when Vivian isn't looking. Habit. I didn't know what it meant until tonight, until I watched her stand up there and call you a girl who plays with fake hair, and I thought about the day she came out of your studio, wherever that appointment actually was. She never told me the address, and she looked in my car mirror the whole ride home like she'd gotten something back. My throat felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with the champagne. 3 weeks ago, a woman with a shaking voice who asked, twice, if I could guarantee no photographs. A hairpin, tortoiseshell with a small pearl, slipping loose from the scarf as she left, and me thinking, for one unbothered second, that pin looks like the one Vivian wears, before deciding I was imagining things because I did not want it to be true. It was true. I looked down at the sample in the little bag. 40,000 strands, give or take, go into a piece like that. I remembered choosing this exact shade against the light of my window, adjusting it twice because the client kept saying, warmer, just slightly warmer, without ever explaining why it mattered so much to her to get it right. It mattered because she was going to wear it in front of 400 people and call the woman who made it a joke. She's out there right now, Margaret said quietly, in a wig you built with your own hands, telling a room full of her oldest friends that you make Halloween costumes for charity cases. I set my glass down on the little cocktail table beside the palm. My hand was steady. I don't know why that surprised me, except that everything else in me did not feel steady at all. Margaret glanced toward the ballroom, where a young man in a headset was fussing with a laptop feeding the anniversary slideshow onto the big screen above the stage. 40 years of Ashford, decade by decade, cycling in silence between speeches. That screen up there, Margaret said, nodding toward it, runs off a cable right behind that curtain. I know the passcode. I've run it myself twice tonight. She took my hand then, her grip startlingly firm for a woman her age. Papery skin over strong bones. Priya,
You could walk in there right now.
plug this photo of the sample and the receipt into that laptop, put it up on that screen for the whole room to see, and tell them whose scalp that hair is sitting on. 30 seconds, and it's over. The wig, the reputation, 40 years of that woman standing on a stage pretending she built herself out of nothing. Nobody would blame you. Not one person in that room would blame you. I looked past her, through the gap in the doors, and caught a sliver of gold light, the edge of the stage, Vivian's shoulder in blue silk, still upright, still certain of herself. I looked down at the hair coiled in my palm, my own work, my own hands, my own 11 nights of patience, and I did not know, standing there with Margaret's fingers locked around mine, what I was going to do with it. I opened the studio door that morning not knowing it would end here, on the stage, with everything decided by what I chose not to say. Margaret's hand left mine. I walked back through the gap in the doors, into the gold light, and Nadia found me before I'd taken 3 steps. She grabbed my elbow, hard enough that I felt it through my sleeve. Priya. Her voice was low, pitched to slice under the ambient noise. Margaret told me. She told me everything, the Hashimoto's, the studio visits, all of it. Nadia's eyes were bright, furious, wet at the rims. Get up there. Take the mic from that woman and tell every single person in this room what she's been hiding while she humiliated you.
No.
Priya, she called you a girl who plays with fake hair. In front of 400 people. She has been doing this to you for 7 years, and you finally have. Nadia's hand tightened. You have the thing that ends it.
Right now.
Tonight. I know what I have. Then use it. I looked at my sister's face, at the particular anger she'd carried since nursing school, the anger that made her good at her job because she couldn't stand watching people get erased. I loved her for it. I still shook my head. Rosa doesn't know I'm telling you her chemo dates, I said. The woman with the ribbon last spring doesn't know I remember her daughter's name. Nobody knows anything about anybody who sits in that chair. That's the whole point of the chair, Nadia. It's the only room in some of these women's lives where nobody gets to look at them and decide what they're worth. I felt my own voice go very even, very quiet. I'm not going to break that because Vivian broke something first. She's not your patient. She's not one of your ladies. She's the woman who spent 7 years making you feel like nothing. I know exactly who she is. A server passed between us with a tray of champagne flutes gone warm under the lights, and I waited until he'd gone. That's why it matters that I don't do it. Nadia stared at me like I'd slapped her, then like she was trying to solve me, and finally, she let go of my elbow. You're going to regret this, she said. Not cruel, just certain. Maybe. I left her by the pillar and crossed the floor. Vivian was still near the edge of the stage steps, one hand resting on the railing, the other pressed flat against her sternum, like she was holding something in place. Julian stood a few feet off, watching his mother with an expression I hadn't seen on him before, something between recognition and grief. He didn't see me coming. Vivian did. Her eyes found me across 20 feet of ballroom floor, and something in her face braced, the way you brace for a blow you've already decided you deserve. I walked up close enough that no one else would hear. Close enough to smell her perfume, the same bergamot she'd worn to every dinner where she'd put me at the end of the table. Close enough to see, for the first time all night, how carefully the part had been set along her hairline. My work. 11 days of it, 40,000 strands, tied by hand under a lamp at my studio while she sat 2 floors below her own store pretending I didn't exist. The piece you're wearing tonight, I said. I made it. Her lips parted. No sound came out. I knew the second you touched it up there on the stage. The way your hand went to the same spot every time, right along the temporal seam. I kept my voice at exactly the volume of a private conversation, no lower, no higher. And I want you to hear this clearly, because I'm only going to say it once. I'm not going to tell anyone. Not Julian. Not Delphine. Not the 400 people standing behind you right now waiting for you to say something. Priya. Her voice cracked on the first syllable and she stopped. You don't have to be afraid of me. I watched it land. Watched 66 years of practiced composure fail to find its footing, watched her throat move, watched the hand on her sternum press harder, as if she could hold the moment inside her chest by force. She had humiliated me on a stage in front of everyone she'd ever wanted to impress, and I had just handed her the one thing she hadn't earned and hadn't asked for. Why? She said finally. It wasn't really a question. It came out cracked open, almost childlike, nothing like the voice that had called me a girl who plays with fake hair an hour ago. I didn't answer. There wasn't an answer that would fit in the time we had. Behind her, the MC's voice rose over the room, warm and practiced, the kind of voice built for exactly this moment. And now, to close out this remarkable evening, 40 years, ladies and gentlemen, 40 stores, one family. Let's bring back to the stage the woman who built it all. Vivian, would you like to say a few final words? Applause rippled up around us, uncertain in places, the sound of a room that didn't yet know what it had just watched. Vivian's eyes stayed on mine 1 second longer, her lips trembling around a word she hadn't chosen yet. Her mouth opened, then closed. Somewhere behind her Margaret stood very still, the paper bag still folded in her hands, watching the woman she'd worked for 30 years the way you watch a building you're not sure will hold its own weight. Vivian turned toward the steps. She climbed them slowly, one hand trailing the railing longer than she needed to. On stage, the MC held the microphone out to her like an offering. She took it. Her fingers closed around it, and for a moment she just stood there, looking out over 400 faces turned up toward her, waiting. Nobody in that ballroom, including me, had any idea what she was about to say. The microphone gave a soft click as she brought it closer. I built this company from a card table in the back of a dry cleaner's on Prescott Street, Vivian said. 11 dresses. That's all I had in 1986. Her eyes moved across the room, then found me. Table 19. She didn't look away this time. I stand up here every year and I talk about fabric, about thread counts and trunk shows, and which season did well.
She paused.
Her hand drifted to the side of her head, fingers grazing the hairline just above her ear. The same gesture I'd watched her make 3 weeks ago, under different lighting, in front of a mirror in my studio, when she thought no one was measuring anything but a wig. Tonight, I want to talk about something else. I didn't move. I didn't nod. I just let her see that I wasn't going to hurt her. Whatever she did next, it wouldn't be, because I'd forced her hand. 4 months ago, I was diagnosed with a thyroid condition, Hashimoto's. She said the word carefully, like she'd practiced it and still didn't trust it in her mouth. One of the things it does is take your hair. Not all at once. In handfuls over months, until you start avoiding mirrors in the afternoon light. Somewhere near the bar, a glass touched down on a tray. Otherwise the room had gone the kind of quiet that has weight to it. I told no one. Not my staff. Not my family. Her gaze flicked, just briefly, to Julian, who was already moving. Not toward the stage.
Toward me.
I found someone through a discreet referral. A cash arrangement. I insisted on secrecy, because I have spent 40 years selling women the idea that they should look effortless, and I was terrified of what it would mean if anyone learned I needed help looking like myself. She stopped. 2 full seconds. 3. Long enough that I heard Margaret, somewhere behind me, exhale like she'd been holding that breath since March. The wig I am wearing tonight, the one that let me stand on this stage under these lights without flinching, was made by my daughter-in-law. Her voice didn't break, but it thinned, went reedy at the edges. By Priya, the woman I introduced an hour ago as the girl who plays with fake hair. The silence didn't last. It cracked open into something between a gasp and a murmur, 400 people finding their voices at slightly different speeds, and under it I heard my own pulse in my ears, loud and stupid and alive. I am sorry, Vivian said, and now she was looking only at me, not at the room, not at the camera someone's assistant was already holding up near the back tables. I have spent 7 years finding small ways to make you smaller because I did not understand what you did. And I have spent 4 months letting you make me larger, more myself, and I never once said thank you. I said the opposite. I said it in front of everyone I know. Julian reached me then. He didn't say anything to me first. He turned to his mother, and his voice, when it came, was low but it carried, because the room had gone still enough to carry a whisper. For months, he said. You let me watch her defend herself at your table over and over, and the whole time he stopped, recalibrated. You could have told me. I couldn't tell anyone, Julian. You told a stranger you paid in cash before you told your own son. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. Mom. She never said a word. Not once. Even tonight. She had every reason to let this humiliate you the way you've humiliated her for years, and she didn't. Do you understand what that means about who she is? Vivian's chin dipped, just slightly. It was the closest thing to a nod I'd ever seen her give in defeat. Near the back, I saw Nadia stand halfway out of her chair, her jaw tight, one hand gripping the edge of the table like she was deciding whether to cross the room and say something she couldn't take back. Rosa caught her wrist and pulled her back down, shaking her head once. Not tonight. Not like this. Nadia sat, but she didn't stop watching Vivian, and I understood, from 20 feet away, exactly what my sister was swallowing for my sake. Delphine crossed the stage in 4 quick steps, her heels loud on the parquet, and before I could decide whether to hold still or step back, her arms were around me, her cheek against the side of my head, and I could smell her perfume, something warm and citrus, and feel her shaking slightly, the way people do after they've said something they've been carrying a long time. Thank you, she said into my ear, quiet, just for me. For both of us, apparently. The applause started somewhere near the back. a table of women I didn't recognize standing first, and it moved through the ballroom like weather, table by table, until Margaret was standing too, and Nadia, and even people who'd laughed 20 minutes earlier when Vivian called me a girl who plays with fake hair. I didn't cry. I want to say that plainly, because I'd expected to. I stood there with Delphine's hand still on my arm and Julian's hand finding my other one, and mostly what I felt was the specific, unglamorous relief of a held breath finally let go. Vivian was still on the stage, alone in the middle of it now, and for the first time in 7 years, she looked exactly her age. I watched 2 board members near the front lean toward each other, already whispering, already recalculating what this would mean for the brand, for the gala's press coverage, for a company built on the promise of effortless polish, now standing in front of 400 witnesses, with its most private seam showing. Whatever happened to me tomorrow, I understood that something had also just started happening to Ashford Boutiques, something Vivian wouldn't be able to undo with an apology. I was still catching my breath, still half inside Delphine's perfume and Julian's hand on my wrist, when a man in a gray suit appeared at my elbow, patient, waiting for a gap in the noise. He held out a card between 2 fingers. Dr. Adeyemi, Chief of Oncology at WIG Memorial. He glanced toward the stage, then back at me. We need to talk. Next week. It's important. I woke up on a Tuesday, and my phone had 91 messages. Not calls. Messages. Photographers wanting quotes. A journalist from a lifestyle magazine asking if I'd sit for a profile called The Woman Behind the Wigs. A woman named Carla from Ohio who said her daughter was starting chemo in 9 days, and did I take out-of-state clients?
Delphine had posted something.
Careful, the way she'd promised. No names of my clients, no photos she didn't already have permission to use. Just her own before and after, the same slides from the gala, and 4 sentences about an artist who worked in silence and deserved to work in daylight. She didn't tag my studio. She didn't have to. Someone in that ballroom had already found it and posted the address. By Thursday, I had a waitlist 11 names long. By the following Monday, WIG Memorial called. I sat across from Dr. Adeyemi in an office that smelled like new carpet, a folder open between us with a hospital letterhead I didn't recognize yet as something I'd be looking at for years. We want to fund a program, she said. Free pieces for patients who can't cover the cost. You'd set the terms. We'd handle referrals and billing on our end so you never touch the paperwork. I thought of Rosa, 6 weeks from her daughter's wedding, and how she'd paid me in installments she pretended weren't installments. I thought of the 91 messages, and how many of them were Carla's. I need to keep it exactly the way I run it now, I said. No cameras in the fitting room. No names given to anyone without written permission. I decide who I take. That's the deal, Dr. Adeyemi said. We're not trying to change what works. I signed on a Thursday, 3 weeks after the gala. My hand was steady. I noticed that the way you notice a bruise has stopped hurting. Julian noticed something too, though he didn't say it directly. He'd started coming home later from his mother's calls, not because she called more, but because the calls were shorter and worse. I heard one end of it through the bedroom door. You don't get to tell me how I should feel about it, Mom. A pause.
No.
I'm not coming to brunch Sunday. He came out with his jaw tight and sat on the edge of the bed without looking at me. She thinks I'm punishing her, he said. Are you? I think I spent 38 years letting her get away with things because it was easier than this. He rubbed his eyes. Turns out easier isn't the same as right. I didn't tell him what to do with his mother. That wasn't mine to hand him. The boutique lost clients. I heard this from Nadia, who heard it from a nurse whose sister worked retail 3 doors down from the Ashford flagship on Prescott Street, the same street where the first shop had opened in 1986 with 11 dresses on a single rack. 2 of Vivian's oldest customers, women who'd been coming since those early days, quietly moved their accounts to a competitor across town. Politics, one of them reportedly said, as if cruelty were a matter of taste rather than character. But new customers came too, younger women who'd seen the gala clip and wanted to buy from a place that had, however messily, been forced into telling the truth. Margaret told me the flagship's spring numbers were up for the first time in 3 years, across all 40 stores. She told me this over coffee in my studio's back room, the first time she'd ever sat in that chair instead of standing in a doorway. "I want to thank you," I said, "for the ribbon. For carrying it 3 weeks." She turned her cup in small circles. "I almost didn't. I told myself it wasn't mine to give away." She looked up. "But watching her cut you down while wearing your work, I couldn't hold both of those at once anymore." Nadia showed up unannounced the following week, stood in my doorway with a paper bag of pastries like an apology she didn't know how to say out loud. "I looked up flights to Ohio without telling you," she admitted. "I was ready to fight your battles whether you wanted me to or not. That wasn't fair to you." "It was very you," I said, and she laughed, and something between us that had gone thin during the gala week filled back in. Not everyone softened. Vivian's sister-in-law, Constance, still addressed me at family gatherings the way you'd address hired help you were trying to be polite to, a courtesy with a closed door behind it. Some people decide who you are once and never revise it. I stopped waiting for that door to open. Vivian came to the studio on a Wednesday in April. No headscarf, no sunglasses, no calling ahead through Margaret. She walked in, took a number from the little dispenser by the door like every other client, and sat in the waiting chairs between a college student and a man in his 70s, until I called her name off the list same as anyone. She sat still while I worked, watching my hands more than she watched the mirror. One afternoon, weeks later, she was there when I measured a 12-year-old named Willow for her first piece. Willow's mother had brought her in on the second day of chemotherapy, the girl's hair still hers, but already coming loose at the temples when she touched it. Vivian didn't say anything while I worked the measuring tape around the small skull, marking numbers on a card the way I'd marked hundreds before. She just watched. When Willow and her mother left, Vivian stayed seated a long moment. Then she said, quietly, almost testing the words before she let them out, "Would you teach me the right name for what you do?" "Not mine. Yours." Vivian's hand stayed there a second longer than it needed to, fingers still touching the crown of the wig I'd built for her 4 months ago. Then she let it drop. 6 weeks later, I was in the studio on a Tuesday, kneeling in front of Willow, who was 12 and had a Minecraft backpack still slung over one shoulder because she refused to take it off, even in the chair. "Does it itch?" Willow asked. "Not this one," I said. "I lined it with silk. Tilt your chin down for me." I ran the measuring tape from the crown to the nape, then temple to temple, calling out the numbers low enough that only I needed to hear them. 22.4. 14.1. Willow watched herself in the mirror the way Rosa had, the way the woman in the headscarf had, the way they all did, like they were checking if the person in the glass still belonged to them. Behind me, a chair scraped against the floor. Vivian had started coming on Tuesdays, not gliding in with an appointment and a hood pulled low, the way she used to. She came through the front door like everyone else now, signed the clipboard, and sat in the waiting chairs until I called her name. Except most Tuesdays, I didn't have a service booked for her at all. She just sat. "What's that called?" she asked, nodding at the tape in my hand. "The point you just measured." "Temple to temple." "Bitemporal width," I said. "Bitemporal." She repeated it slowly, like a word in a language she was only starting to learn. "And the part where you attach the individual strands." "Ventilating," I said. "1 knot at a time into the base." "How many knots?" 40,000, give or take, for a full head. She didn't say anything to that. She just picked up a folded stack of capes from the counter and started smoothing them flatter, lining up the edges, the way Margaret used to do without being asked. I let her. It wasn't my job to tell Vivian Ashford what she was allowed to fold. Willow's mother came to pick her up 20 minutes later, and Willow left with the wig in a box under her arm, promising to send a picture from the wedding, not hers, her cousin's, in 6 weeks, the first event she planned to attend without a hat. When the door closed, Vivian was still standing there with the cape squared in her arms. "I looked it up," she said. "What you do. There's a certification. A hospital affiliation exam. I didn't know that. Most people don't." I told a woman at the Wickham board dinner last week that my daughter-in-law was a hair prosthetist. She said the word carefully, like she'd practiced it in the car. "Not a girl who plays with wigs." I kept coiling the measuring tape around my fingers and didn't answer right away. There had been a version of that night, 30 seconds, maybe less, when I could have taken the paper bag out of Margaret's hands and put it on a screen in front of 400 people at the Whitcomb Hotel ballroom. Vivian Ashford, 40 years of building a name since 1986, 40 stores, undone by a receipt and a strand of hair with a blue ribbon still tied around it. I'd felt the shape of that power in my hand. It would have been so fast. I hadn't done it because Rosa trusted me with her face before her daughter's wedding. Because the woman in the headscarf trusted me enough to come back a second time. Because dignity isn't something you get to hand out to people you've decided deserve it and take away from people who don't. It either means something for everyone, or it's just another kind of cruelty, wearing better shoes. You could have ended me, Vivian said, like she'd been following the same thread. That night, you had everything. I know, I said. Why didn't you? I set the tape down on the counter, next to the capes she'd folded. Because I spent 7 years being quiet at your table, and everyone in that family thought it meant I had nothing to say. It never did. I was just waiting for the truth to be strong enough to stand up without me shouting it into place. That night, it finally was. She nodded, slow, and reached for another cape to fold, though there weren't any left. Margaret told me once, Vivian said, that you kept every client's name in a locked drawer, even mine, even after everything. I asked her why you'd bother protecting someone who'd humiliated you in front of a room. She said you weren't protecting me. You were protecting the drawer. She wasn't wrong. I think I understand that now, Vivian said. It took me 66 years and a bad diagnosis to learn what a promise is worth when nobody's watching you keep it. Nadia still checks in every few days, mostly to make sure Vivian hasn't reverted, mostly satisfied that she hasn't. Margaret retired from the boutique in the spring and now spends Thursday afternoons at my counter doing intake calls because she said 30 years of scheduling Vivian's life qualified her for something. Julian and his mother speak, carefully, the way people do when a bridge has been rebuilt but nobody's tested the weight limit yet. As for me, I still spend my mornings the way I always have, kneeling in front of a chair, measuring a stranger's grief in centimeters, turning it into something they can walk out the door wearing. Some of them will know my name. Most won't need to. I used to think my silence was something the Ashfords had trained into me. Now I know better. Silence was never my weakness. It was the one thing in that family nobody could take from me, because I'd chosen it myself, and a truth that's had time to set doesn't need to be shouted to be believed. If someone in your life has made you feel small for work that actually matters, don't wait for a stage and a microphone. Keep building the thing they can't see yet. It has a way of speaking for itself.